Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of our new format at Junkyard Restoration, and allow me to introduce you to my 1990 Jeep Comanche. This particular Comanche is the Pioneer trim. It's equipped with the 4-liter Renix edition of the inline 6. It's a factory 4x4, and what's most unique about it, I think, is of course it's equipped with an AX5 transmission, and it's a bucket seats truck. It has a couple of other interesting options as well. It has the sliding rear window, which I guess not all of them have, and on top of that, it's a non-AC truck, which is interesting. I guess it was sold new in Washington, and the buyer or dealership that put the order decided it didn't need AC up there. So overall, it's relatively clean. It's pretty straight. It's got paint fade and a few dings and dents, but overall, it's a pretty interesting truck. I've been looking for one of these my entire life, or my adult life anyway, and being into Cherokees, it's pretty much a Cherokee, but the pickup truck version. They're what's called a uniframe, which means the front half of it is entirely Cherokee up to about the back of the door, and then after that it becomes Comanche, where it has an X-frame bolted or welded into the unibody of the existing Cherokee, and there you have it. It does have metric ton package as well. So interestingly, I'd like to really know how many twins this truck would have. I imagine it's a very small number. Based on some research that I've done, it's one of only 2,100 4x4 long beds that were made that year. So how many of those had the 6-cylinder? How many of those were equipped with the 6-cylinder and the AX15, and how many of those were equipped with the AX15, the 6-cylinder, and were 4-wheel drive, and how many of those were Pioneer trim with sliding windows, bucket seats, no aircon. That's an interesting package combination. I can't imagine this vehicle has very many twins, if had any at all, especially now that we're 30 years on. It's got to be the only surviving, version of itself, so that's very interesting. The previous owner that I bought it from did do a few upgrades. Obviously, it's been lifted, and he did do the lift properly. It's a Rough Country, I believe, which is not a brand I particularly care for, but overall it looks nice and it runs and drives down the road very well. He did have the geometry correction brackets put on, so when it goes down the highway, it is smooth as a limousine. It's super nice. He put TJ Gambler wheels on it, which, again, a wheel I don't really care for, but on this truck, it looks proper. It looks really nice. He obviously added the toolbox. It's got a bed liner in it. That's the plastic factory one. It may have been with the truck since new. And of course, he had some upgrades under the hood. So without any further ado, let's get to that. So here we have the Renix 4-liter engine. It's been rebuilt. It was rebuilt in 2005. The previous owner bought it with a blown motor apparently and had it redone. He added a little header to it, and overall just had a few very, very small upgrades done to the inside of the motor. No cams or anything like that, just clearance differences and a few other small things like that. So it runs very well. And these motors are not the most desired of the 4-liters, and you can kind of see why. It's very messy. There's a lot of wires, there's a lot of vacuum lines, and these things are a little bit tricky to keep going at their full health when they're this old, but this one seems to be in pretty good shape. There's only a few things I'd like to change to help it, keep its long life. The next thing that he really upgraded on was the cooling system. He added a different overflow tank. He TIG welded it himself. I hate it. I hate it. I guess it works better than the old one because it's not plastic, but it's bad. So we're going to be looking into changing that. And he also has a Willwood brake bias controller down there. He was towing with it, so he, I guess, decided he needed that. And other than that, it's a relatively stock engine bay with not a lot of upgrades or anything in there, which is just the way I like them. On the inside of the truck, He's obviously added a radio, as pretty much all the owners of these vehicles do over this amount of time. And it's got like a little sub behind the seats that's going to get taken out for sure. He had a different shift ball on it. I put back on the factory one, as that is more proper. And then other than that, the interior is very stock. An interesting thing I did learn about these is that most of these Comanches had, if they had buckets, they had vinyl buckets, which I've only seen in Cherokees on the government ones. So that's an interesting difference. And then of course the C-pillar, or I guess B-pillar maybe in a pickup truck, is a little bit different than a Cherokee. But other than that, from the doors forward, it is all Cherokee. It's all the same stuff. It all works the same way. So when I do these videos, you might hear me interchange Cherokee, Comanche, XJ, MJ, all those different terms interchangeably, just because I'm used to working on Cherokees, and so sometimes I have a little slip of the tongue. But this is it. This is the 1990 Comanche. This is the star of the video today. And without any further ado, we're going to go back into time to yesterday when I started doing the project that we worked on. Now, as you can see, we're in the middle of the project. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump right into that project, and I'll show you what I've done so far. I'll get you caught up and we'll jump right into it and try to see if we can get this finished out today. What we're actually doing is we got these fog lights here from the Junkyard, and we did a little bit of refurbishing on them, cleaned them up a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and finish up that install. One thing I wanted to do when I started this install was use the factory Jeep wiring and relay for the fog lights. So I grabbed all that stuff out of the Junkyard, and I'm going to show you how I did that right now. Okay, so the key to having the factory wiring work for your fog lights is a couple of parts you're going to need. First of all, you're going to want one of these, which is the rocker switch for the fog lights. And in this case, it also has the rear defroster, which I have some plans for that later, so we're actually going to leave that as is, and we're going to utilize that button for something later on in the project. The next thing you're going to need is some of the wiring, okay? So this is the remainder of the clip that I cannibalized for this project, and this is the other end to it here. Okay, now this end here actually runs behind the headlight, down behind the grille, all the way across in that wiring loom there, and up behind the other headlight, around the battery, and into your main relay box. And this is for the Renix motors. The high output motors are a little bit different, and the of course the OBD2 trucks are different, and some of the really early 80s ones are a little different. But for the Renix ones, this is how this works. What you're going to do is you need to grab, while you're at the Junkyard, this relay right here. It just clips onto the body, and you're going to want to take the wires, and you're going to have to take apart that wiring loom that we talked about, and you're going to have to get it all the way down to a certain point. You're going to have to get it down to where you get the actual plugs to the fog lights. The wiring on them is black and green on one end, and black. The black is your ground. Now the way this is wired up, this all goes to a central ground that shares a ground point with a lot of other grounds in the lighting in the front of the truck. So what you're going to do is you're going to find that central ground point, and you can clip it right there. And you're going to take the black and greens, which also come to a point. You'll see later when we tilt the bumper down to kind of install some stuff, I'll show you. And you're going to clip those as well. So the blacks you're going to have to find a new ground for, because they used to have that central ground. So that's the only part that really won't be that factory. But everything else should be pretty clean. Now you're going to trace those wires up through the loom, behind the headlight again, up to the plug. Now the plug is right here. This is that same plug I showed you right here that I've taken apart. These are just Junkyard ones, okay? So you have those. You're going to unplug that plug from the Junkyard, and you're going to just go ahead and clip everything, but be careful not to clip the black and green that you'll need, and the black that goes to the ground points. Now one black you will have to clip right away is the one for the relay, which is right here. And so that way you'll have this big crunchy old wiring loom that'll have the relay with the black and green wire and the black wires that go to the central ground points, okay? and this black relay wire, the ground for the relay, and that should go all the way out to the plugs. And if you want to get some extra parts like I did, you can also undo the part that stays behind in the truck, which is actually this part one. This is the part that would stay behind in the truck. I took it for extra pins in case I needed them later in the project for other things. And in this case, I took this side of the plug for extra pins as well. And I also traced the power wire for the headlights because I wasn't sure how it was wired in when I initially took it apart at the junkyard. And I traced it all the way through the loom up there like we talked about. And I just clipped it all, took it all with me. Now, Jeep actually helps us out quite a bit because from the plug I showed you here, from this point backwards to the cab of the truck, this is the main wiring loom. From that point backward, all the wiring for the fog lights that you'll need is already in the truck. It's already there. It's hanging out. In my case, been hanging out there for 33 years. So all you'll need is this section of the plug, the relay, fog lights, and the fog light wiring. Now, when you get all this junk, this pile of garbage, back to your shop and you're ready to actually install it, here's what you're going to do. First thing you're going to do, obviously, unplug the battery anytime you're working with electrics in the car. And the first thing you're going to do is unplug this plug here, and you're going to take a look at it. And you're going to match them up with the plug that you have from the junkyard, okay? And you're going to match it up to this one, and you're going to see where they come in. They come in on the bottoms. See on the very bottom there how the outer two are missing on both. The outer right one's missing on the top as well, but we're focusing on the bottom. Those are where the wires for the relay and the fog lights actually connect to this harness. So what you'll do is, when you get back, you'll unplug it, take this part of it, flip it over, and you'll notice all this green stuff that's, it is a little bit of corrosion, but it's mostly some anti-corrosion grease that Jeep used at the time. That's mostly good for it, actually. Even though it looks totally disgusting. I did clean up the one in the truck quite a bit before I put it back. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a pick, like this guy here, and you're going to undo this red retainer, okay? This red retainer sits in the middle of the plug, and this is what holds the wire pins into the plug. So once you take a pick and get that out, or you can use needle nose, sometimes that works a little better. Once you pull that out, just set it aside. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take that same pick and you're actually going to see those little tiny clips there on the edges of the pins. There's like a little gap, okay? So those pins are held on by a little plastic clip. You're going to actually bend it backward, and then you're going to pull the wire gently out of the back, and it will just simply pull right out. Sometimes they're a little fussy, but for the most part, they come right out. And once you have that, you'll do the same thing to this plug here, okay? And you'll actually just insert the pin into the plug. And once you get done that, you put the red holder piece back in it, and you just simply plug it back into the truck. Now this section is now done. In that time, you would have had to run all the wires through at least the headlight section, at least get it out to like here, because otherwise you're gonna have a big mess and it's gonna be somewhat hard to do, but it's doable, okay? You'll do all that. And then you'll have the relay hanging with a bunch of wires up here somewhere, wherever you put it. So then you'll plug this into the, and when I say plug it in, I mean it's literally a pop tab that goes into the core support, just pops right in. And then all the wires are basically kind of where they need to go. So you'll have most of the wiring done. At this point, you could either do the grounds, which is what I still have to do left. You could start running the wires to where their final locations are, clean that all up if you'd like, or you can go to the inside. I'm going to show you what we did with the inside. You'll need one of these from the junkyard. We already have another one in the truck here. So you'll undo the plastic beauty ring or interior piece, binnacle, surround, whatever you want to call it, and you'll actually just pull that out, set it aside. It's held on by a couple of Phillips screws. There's two here, one by your headlight switch and one by the cigarette lighter, and then the rest of it are little pop tabs like right here, and it just pops right out. Set that aside. You're gonna have to do some more work on that later, but we'll get to that. Next, you're going to have to install this, so you'll need a new screw. I recommend just saving the one from the junkyard if you can, just bring it with you. And all the wiring for the fog lights is already hanging out in here, and it's wrapped in this tape and foam that's kind of gross. And you'll undo all of that, and you'll just plug it right into your rocker switch, okay? And then you'll just screw it down. Now, the reason why we haven't put the binnacle surround back in is that's still going to need more work. We're going to show that on the video today. So now you're pretty much caught up to where we are. We're going to go ahead and get into this. The other thing we started doing while we were in the middle of this, and I had to take the grill out, or at least some of it, to make this a lot easier, I decided to paint the grill because it was quite faded and rock chipped. So we're also working on that, and we're going to try to get both of those projects done today, and we'll see how it gets there. Okay, so it's quite bright out here, but the last of the painting I have to do, oh, shaky hands. The last bit of painting that I have to do is the grill, and it just needs about 2 more coats of the semi-gloss black Rust-Oleum. All of the shiny gray that is supposed to be on there is underneath a bunch of masking tape, and we're going to hope that it comes out pretty well. The headlight buckets and the trim surrounds have already been completed and are dry, so we just have to finish this up, and all of our painting for this project will be complete, and we can start assembling. So now we're going to talk about the actual construction of the fog lights and some of the stuff we did to try to recondition them a little bit. The only parts that are missing here is the actual fog light buckets, which are here, which are held on by, I believe, a 17mm nut and retainer on the bottom, which you'll need a deep well for. And that's it has its wires that run through the back of it, of course, and that's essentially all there is to the bucket. Here we have the rest of the parts that are involved here. So this is the reflector. Now we used some Home Depot chrome interior paints to kind of shine these up. It's not factory. It doesn't look factory, but it looks a lot better than it did. As you can see in this one here, was very heavily corroded and pitted. I did the best that I could with it. It's obviously been taken apart before. You can tell because it's held on by these, wood screws. So it's been apart. And then you'll have the actual glass and the retainer ring and the gaskets. Now, every junkyard Jeep that I've ever seen, these fog lights, the seals have let go a long time ago. Moisture has seeped in and has started to rust out the bucket, and this causes this pretty gnarly orange ring around the glass. Now, I've done the best I could with these to polish them up, just using a Scotch-Brite pad and just scrubbing away on them. And they don't look 100%, but they're pretty close. For the Comanche, we're not going to be trying to go too crazy beautiful on it. If I wanted to do that, you can get brand new fog lights on eBay for around $70 for the pair if you wanted to do that. I wanted to give a shot at restoring a pair just for fun, and if I didn't like it, I could always just get another pair, no big deal. So the way that these go together is the bucket sits, or this bucket, the light bucket, sits inside the actual fog light bucket. The gasket ring goes around that on the inside. You can see this hole here. This actually lines up with a small little dimple on the gasket. Then you'll lay your glass on top and make sure it's right side up. There's some letters there, ROL, and it says made in USA, Halogen. Make sure it's right side up, don't be silly. Okay, and then after that, all you have to do is put the retainer ring on and screw it down with some hardware, and it's done. The other thing you should do is get new bulbs for these. These ones are the old ones. I just left them in there for painting. But they are an H3 size, 12 volts, 100 amp bulb. You can get them at any auto parts store, or you can get them online on Amazon. Okay, and that's pretty much the construction of the fog lights. Okay, so the first thing you're going to have to do when you start tackling this job is pull the bumper off. They're held on by 6 retaining bolts, 3 on each side, just behind the splash shield that comes down from the inner fender well and wraps right here where the evaporative emissions equipment is. Same on the other side, but there's no evaporative emissions equipment on there. So you'll push the splash shield up out of your way, and you'll pull these bolts out on each side, and that will allow you, as you see here, I have the hell on jack stand. You'll be able to tilt the bumper and kind of move it around as you need. Just make sure that every once in a while you kind of tuck it back in, so that way it doesn't fall and damage it. You can pull it all the way out if that's what you prefer. So behind here is the wiring that we started running. Those are the factory plugs for the fog light, and here's that black and green bit of wire loom that we talked about earlier. So you can see it's kind of wrapped in plastic, but only a little bit because it's been dissected from the whole loom that was underneath it. So we're going to go ahead and clean all this up. We're going to find some good ground point for the grounds. So we got a bit of a tangled spaghetti mess here. Yeah, what a mess. So we have our 2 grounds here, our black ones. We're going to go ahead and cut them, and we're going to put ends on them and find a nice little place to put them. I think I see some good spots in there I'll show you in a moment, and hopefully those will work out nicely. And then the black and greens are pretty much good. They're a little long since they had to run through the loom originally, but we're just going to go ahead and wrap them up nicely and keep them in place, and we'll get right to it. Okay, so we put the new grille and the new headlight bezels in, well, the repainted ones. I'm so happy with the results. It's a little blemished and there's a few things I'd like to redo, so overall we will probably come back and at least do the center grille section again at some point in the future. For now, it looks decent enough considering the condition of the rest of the truck, so it can stay like that for now. And the fog lights, constructing those and finally getting to see if they actually work is the final and last step. So without any further ado, let's get on to it. Okay, so I was working on the fog lights and I wanted to test them and I couldn't get them to work. So I had to do some troubleshooting, which took a fair amount of time, as you've probably seen how much darker it is in here since the last clip. But I did find out what it was, that the grounds that I had in the back behind the bumper were not sufficient enough to transfer the power that it needed to actually run the lights. So what we did is we ran a central ground from a ground point back there down to the core support, and all of the grounds for the two fog lights and the relay are all centralized with that ground there, so that is allowing them to work. So we'll finish up the install here and we'll call it a day. Well, it's the next morning. It got a little too dark to film last night when I was finishing the things up, so we still have one more thing to do on this project to tidy up the install of the fog lights. The next thing we have to do, as promised, is the binnacle surround. In the case of the Renix and early 80s vehicles, you have these inlays here that are blocked off when your vehicle was not optioned with the options that would go there, in this case the fog light toggle. The way they're connected is by these little plastic rivets that are kind of melted on, I'm assuming, by the assembly line. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here with a Dremel and we're going to Dremel off all four of these, take a little screwdriver, and it will pop right off. So let's get into that. Okay, so now we have the binnacle surround back inside the dashboard. As you can see, this is the finished product of what it's going to look like near your rocker switch. It just clips right back in and it has that nice factory look. So what's left to do here is we just have to screw this thing back in, and that will complete this little part of the project. Okay, so that concludes the first video, and I hope you guys tune in for more with this project. Everything is working now and it looks great, and we'll continue to keep moving on to the next thing, which should be out in the next week or two. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.